Good morning to all and welcome to our final session of the LCOY 2021, which is focused on restoring the climate. I'm the solution and I'm Falak from Sydney. Wow, what an amazing journey we have done so far. We started discussing how we can, what restoration means to us. And in there, we discussed that we need to slow down our pace so we can have a me time. We need to respect our tradition and the values of the land that we are living. And a very common thing that have been emerging throughout from Friday till Saturday that we have is that until unless we have strengthened relationship with the self, community, and nature, I think we won't be able to do anything or bring any change if we want to do something for the climate. And also it was an occurring theme that we need to educate ourselves and to educate others and make them aware. Until unless they understand what the real problem is, I don't think we can be the solution. And then we move forward to talking about, wow, what do we have? The nature rights versus our human rights. And in that, we discussed so many different points yesterday. And the interesting that came was that until unless we really connect with the land that we are in, we can't understand what the importance is. And until unless we are connect and have relationship with the land that we are living, then only we can care. And what happening so far is that we are very much disconnected, and we think that the land, the country is different than who we are. So that what is, and then we also learned about the art as activism. Like art have played role since ancient time in changing, in bringing change about to spread the message. And we had amazing speaker yesterday, and the session was so amazing. And in that we find out that if we keep endangering the species and if we are endangering the nature, then all we can see is us disappearing as well, because we all work together. And in the evening, we had a lovely session about talking about the resilience and the food security. And wow, I was amazed to like, I was also thinking, it made me think as well that really, if we don't sustain ourselves, there is no sustainability program to secure our food, to have our own grown and to restore it, then there is a big danger coming in the future, and which we won't be able to overcome. So it's not someone else doing it and I'll be just wait and see, hey, maybe later I will get a help. But until unless we chip in and do something for it, I don't think we will get any, then only we can get the return from what we are sowing. And also we had a beautiful meditation on the planet, which is essential because what we think, our thought power really affects what's happening outside. And also one important thing came is that we need to start falling in love again and again in relationship, and how also we can help in like taking a step forward. And all we can do is not a big thing, but little change can also help. But if we do it collectively in a community, then we can make a big hand. So what we have today? Well, we have again brought you really some great speakers whom I'm really looking forward to hear from. We will have acknowledgement to the country by Ms. Kim Wormsley, followed by two presentations, a Q&A on history of consumerism, which is a really good thing to listen to by Lakshmi Gandu. And second, Mr. Juan on the effect of our consciousness of our ecosystem, which followed by Q&A. Then you have a 5-minute break, which will be followed by some stretches by Kim, which you all must have felt really nice after doing it yesterday. Then a panel discussion on restoring normality. What can be the new normal? You can start thinking about it from now, that what that new normal can be. Then we'll have some time of chatting with each other, connection in the breakout rooms, feedback, Q&A, and we're going to end the session with a short meditation. So this morning, our acknowledgement of the country is coming from Queensland. So I would like to welcome Kim Wormsley. She's a descendant of the Mananjali people of Bow Desert in Queensland and Wiradjuri people of New South Wales. She has links to Kamilaroi and the New Zealand Murri culture. Kim has been on a lifelong journey of self discovery through creating, which means she's an artist who, over the years, have proactively taken part in working with the youth and community to support and enable the growth of better ways in doing and being in two worlds. As the world makes more and more to the environment realities that are set before us, Kim feels we are all messengers supporting the cause of influencing change through conversation and action. We need to listen more to Mother Earth and our First Nation people for guidance so that we can change the future to help our planet together. Welcome, Kim. Thank you so much for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you, thank you, Fatima. Thank you, everyone. Hello. Jingari, Miyangu, Jimbalang Nanyanari Kim. Indigenous people have been on the earth for 60,000 years. To survive for so long was a true story of resilience and respect for the land, seas, rivers, mountains, nature, and mortality. When you observe the Indigenous peoples of the world, you could identify the blue tribes as the Native Americans, the air totem, the white tribes, the Vikings of the Scandinavia, the water totem, the Asian continents and island people are red totem, fire totem, and our First Nations people here in Australia, the brown tribes, the earth totem. We all had a job to care for our planet under the guidance of our faith and cultural practices. To nurture and live alongside one another, not knowing each other existed, we managed our earth. We harvested our native plants and berries and nuts to create bread and medicines. We used timbers, plants to make tools and weapons and shelter. We ate healthily. We had elders and councils that would guide the tribes to support valuable decision making that affected all, from arranged marriages to trading tools and materials. When you look at the diversity of our Indigenous peoples of the world, you can also see the commonalities in our faith. We are dedicated to Mother Earth. She is part of our prayers, chanting, singing, dancing rituals and practices. Across the world, we acknowledge her energetic beauty and give thanks to what she provides and takes from us. Her life is invaluable as it helps us grow our food and oxygen. It nourishes the earth and supports the soils to be rich and hard so that we can travel the lands and follow our curiosities. For our founding First Nations people, each one planted seeds to care for country, looking after the earth, the land, the rivers, and each other, and to keep harmony amongst all. They scattered across the land we now call Australia and created the rivers and mountains and animals. Each nation's founding father developed law and cultural practices to support the continuous growth of their mother with the guidance from their ancestors. As they relied on her for food, water, medicine, shelter, and clothes, it is our strong belief that she is our mother. It is our religion to care for country and nurture the deep connection we have with her and all living things. Australia for me is Pamanyangan, which means permanently younger, forever growing, and eternally ours as guardians. As our ancestors created and nurtured our land, it was then nature in all its forms was manifest power of these great founding spirits of Aboriginal nations of the world. The earth is our home. It is our mother. We must look after her. She is living, breathing, listening, absorbing, observing, feeling. She is reacting to the changes big and small. She is my mother. She is your mother. She is our commonality. Without her, we would not exist. It is our responsibility to acknowledge her importance to our existence. In saying this, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I live in Toowoomba, the Jadawa and Gaibal people. I also acknowledge all online today and the traditional custodians of your lands throughout Australia and the world. Thank you for holding the memories and traditions and passing them down through image and scribe. We acknowledge your strength and resilience. To you, our young peoples of the world, we encourage you to keep moving forward. You have a big responsibility to take on in healing a world that has slowly been destroyed through ignorance and greed. The welcome to this and change is here. I would like to pay my respects to all elders of the world and youth, past, present, and future. The truth is, we are the solution. You are the solution. Your passion, integrity, and voice is valued and appreciated by the ancestors. It is through them that you are here. To be here is to be chosen because of your heart and passion to save our home. Keep it real, keep moving, and never give up on our mother. Have a great conference today and congratulations on all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. That was beautiful. Really appreciate it, and also for your good wishes for the rest of the conference as well. So thank you for joining us today. On that note, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Lakshmi. So Lakshmi Gandu, she'll be talking to us about the next topic, which I'm really looking forward to, the history of consumerism. But just to fill you in a little bit about Lakshmi's background. So Lakshmi recently graduated from Fairholme College in 2020 and is, I'd say, a pretty awesome example for the youth. So we're honoured to have you here, Lakshmi. She's been part of the Toowoomba Youth Peace Group since 2018 and loves using her role to advocate for equality and inclusion for all individuals of society. And as a fun fact, Lakshmi is fascinated by Greek mythology and has done a few paintings based on the myths. So that's pretty cool. And I don't know if we'd have time, but it'd be cool to see them. We'll have to see. So great to have you here, Lakshmi. I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm also from Toowoomba. So firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I stand on today, the Gayabul and Jarrawa people. I wish to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and extend these respects to any First Nations people present today. We acknowledge them for their rich culture and that has a strong connection to the land, and hope to draw inspiration from their wisdom in restoring the climate. I also would like to thank Brahma Kumaris for organising such an exciting event where we can learn and share our diverse range of perspectives. I do have a PowerPoint, so I'll just share my screen. Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favour fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice. Good morning, everyone. As I've been introduced, my name is Lakshmi, and today I will be giving a presentation on my understanding of the history of consumerism and some of my hot tips that I use in day-to-day life to reduce my impact on the earth. Fire and Ice, the poem by Robert Frost, is a text that describes the end of the world due to human beings' tendency for self-destruction. Therefore, my presentation is going to describe the impact our actions have had on our planet throughout the years and how we can change the path we have paved towards a hopeful future. Today's presentation draws inspiration from David Attenborough's extraordinary film, A Life on Our Planet, released last year. So if you can't trust my word, trust the experts, as I will be including several of the statistics from So if you ever get the opportunity, it is quite an amazing documentary to watch. So let's start at the beginning of the Holocene, 11,700 years ago. An ice age has ended and the earth begins to warm, melting the glaciers that have covered the land. Mass extinctions have occurred 5 times over the last 4 billion years. As time progresses, the average temperature has not varied by more than 1 degree Celsius over 10,000 years. Forests in the ocean and on land have locked away carbon to maintain the balance of the atmosphere. Huge herds on the plains keep the grasslands rich and productive. Mangroves and coral reefs provide nurseries for fish species that are then able to venture into the open waters. Jungles are able to act as solar panels to capture the sun's energy, adding moisture and oxygen to the global air currents. The polar ice caps play the role of mirrors to reflect the sun's powerful rays to keep the earth cool. There is stability, allowing the earth to become a kind of Garden of Eden, where life can flourish. This stability is due to the diversity of our planet, which causes seasons to become predictable. Because of this, the modern human learns how to utilize the seasons to farm, and with this development, modern civilization begins. Let us fast forward to the 1930s, where the world population is 2.3 billion people, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is 280 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness on Earth is at 66%. World War II has begun, and the Great Depression is over. Pluto has been discovered and declared as the 9th planet of our solar system. There are new technological advances in aviation, radio, and film. The world seems limitless, with the possibilities of progress. Much of the wilderness is yet to be discovered, but we know that we rely on Earth to support our lives. Our next time jump is into the mid-1950s. The world population is 2.7 billion. The carbon in the atmosphere is 310 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness is at 64%. World War II is over, and technology is advancing for a better quality of life. However, humans are still unaware of the consequences their actions will have on Earth. Into the next decade, there is much political turmoil, with civil rights movements underway, Vietnam War, and political assassinations. The world population has increased to 3 billion people. The carbon in the atmosphere is now 315 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness is at 62%. The significant event of the moon landing reveals to many that the wild is finite and needs our protection. It shows us that humans are bound by the limited natural world. The late 1970s has come around. We see the population continuing to increase to 4.3 billion. The carbon in the atmosphere is 335 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness is at 55%. Peace has become a trend. Predators have been eliminated, these diseases are under control, and nothing can stop the evolution of humans, even at the cost of our planet. Whole habitats disappear, and the monoculture of oil palm becomes popular. This causes the culling of 700 species of trees in each small patch of rainforest for the production of palm oil. This deforestation leads to the endangerment of the orangutan. These actions show that we cannot continue to destroy rainforests, as it is unsustainable and harmful to the biodiversity of the planet. It's late 1990s. The population has doubled in the last 3 decades to 5.9 billion people. The carbon in the atmosphere is 360 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness has again decreased to 46%. The discovery of coral bleaching is made, and further research reveals that the causes are from the warming of the ocean. Great coral reefs begin to turn into graveyards, where little to no species can survive. There is an increase in the burning of fossil fuels, which releases carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The notable change in atmospheric carbon is a feature evident in all previous mass extinctions. Historically, this change was due to volcanic activity over a period of 1 million years. But the burning of coal and oil has had the same effect in less than 200 years. The stability of the global air temperature up to this point begins to decline. Evidence shows that the stability is due to the absorption of heat by the oceans. The North and South poles lose ice as the ocean has reached its limit of absorbing heat. The Earth has become 1 degree Celsius warmer, and this change exceeds the speed of any change in the last 10,000 years. Now we are back to the present. The world population is 7.8 billion. The carbon in the atmosphere is 415 parts per million, and the remaining wilderness is at 35%. We have overfished 30% of fish stocks to critical levels, cut down 3 trillion trees, and cleared 50% of all rainforests. We have reduced freshwater populations by over 80%. Half of fertile land on Earth is farmland. 70% of the mass of birds are domestic birds, with chickens making up most of this statistic. Humans account for over 1/3 of the weight of mammals, where another 60% of mammals are raised to be eaten. This leaves the rest of the mammals to make up 4%. All wild animal populations have more than halved in less than 100 years. With the current trends, our future looks fairly devastating. It is predicted that the Amazon rainforest is reduced to nothing more than a dry wasteland, altering the global water cycle. The Arctic's ice is reduced, meaning that less of the sun's energy can be reflected back, and the speed of global warming rapidly increases. With the melting of frozen soils, methane is released, further accelerating the rate of global warming. The acidification of the oceans means that coral reefs die and fish populations crash. Food production for humans enters a crisis as soils become exhausted of nutrients. Pollinating insects disappear, weather becomes more unpredictable, the Earth becomes 4 degrees Celsius warmer, with large parts of Earth inhabitable. Millions of people are homeless, and the 6th mass extinction is imminent. We all understand the fate of our world if we do not do something. The key is to restore biodiversity to prevent this man-made disaster. In the words of David Attenborough, we must rewild the world. Some of his suggested solutions is to improve education and healthcare around the world so we can address the issue of the overpopulation of humans on Earth. This will raise the standard of living for many people. By restricting fishing practices as they have in Palau, we can restore the health of marine life. Implementing no fish zones in over 1/3 of our seas will not affect the source of food we need, but it will definitely benefit the biodiversity of the ocean. This course of action is already being taken by the UN. It is also vital that deforestation is immediately stopped. In Costa Rica, their rainforests began with covering 3/4 of the land, which was then reduced to 1/4. After halting deforestation, they were able to restore the forest for it to increase to cover half the land. Of course, these solutions address global issues that may be a little beyond some of us. So on a personal and local level, we can create habits to form a lifestyle that considers our environment and our well-being. There is a model of production and consumption that is known as circular economy. Some of you may have heard of it. As explained by Dominic, a circular economy is one that exchanges the typical cycle of make, use, dispose in favor of as much reuse and recycling as possible. The longer materials and resources are in use, the more value is extracted from them. So here are some of my hot tips my family and I try to implement in our lives. We eat a largely plant-based diet, buy our fruits and vegetables from the local weekend markets, and do not buy processed meats such as salami. Therefore, we can change our eating habits by minimizing our meat and processed food consumption. We need to reduce the area we farm, and by taking on a largely plant-based diet, we can halve the land we require to produce food. This will also increase the yield of the land. Examples of sustainable farming can be found in the Netherlands. Buying locally will also benefit our environment with less transportation needed and less emissions being produced. Also, checking ingredients can be beneficial so that we don't consume things like palm oil. You would be surprised by the number of our favorite foods that contain palm oil. And with the increase of wearing the trendiest clothes, we have all seen the rise of fast fashion. but by buying less clothes in general, buying from sustainable brands, revamping old clothes and thrifting, we can combat the negative effects of fast fashion. And this is a daggy photo of my friend and I while we were thrift shopping at Vinnie's. To continue on the line of shopping, I have a challenge for you all. When you go shopping, see how many items you can carry without a bag. Or if you're more organised than me, you can take your own bags to the shops. Many shops offer bags, but if possible, it's better to use your own reusable ones. If you do acquire some plastic, did you know that you can recycle your plastic bags and packaging at Woolies or Coles? Say you buy a loaf of bread or a pack of Tim Tams. The packaging can be put in a red cycle bin and get recycled. But remember to check the symbols on the packaging. A lot of us probably already know these hot tips. If so, this is a reminder to make a conscious effort to contribute to the betterment of our future. Sometimes it's not easy, but it's about improving where we can and lessening our impact on the earth, not necessarily being perfect. Overall, the secret of life on earth is that we thrive together. Here's to rewilding the world so that we do not end in fire or in ice. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lakshmi. And I really like that ending note on what we can do practically, and that it's what we can do, not necessarily being perfect. I think that makes it something that can be quite overwhelming and big, as something, no, yes, I can do something, even if it's these changes just today or this week. And then, you know, once we've got that, what's next? You know, how can we do it even better? So I was going to open it up now to the floor if other people have questions for Lakshmi. We have time for a Q&A. I'm just doing a time check until, so we have 10 minutes now for a Q&A. So what I'll ask is, if you have a question, you can put up your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of the screen. So you'll see there's a little smiley face, it says reactions, and if you click on that, then you can click raise hand if you would like to ask a question. But I might just start while we're waiting for people to think of questions and put their hands up. I'll start with one for you. And this is maybe more of a point of inspiration for us to hear a bit about your story. What keeps you passionate about this topic? Or what was that moment that made you become really passionate about this topic?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a moment as such, but I guess, I mean, I'd like to think naturally that I'm pretty strong-minded with my values. So once I've got something in my head, I'm pretty like, I got to do this, like live what I value kind of thing. So I guess with the whole climate change perspective, it's also been about like who I've been hanging out with, I guess like friends-wise. They've also influenced, I guess, my perspective in a way, and like just educating me on climate change and things like that. But even we did a trip to the Great Barrier Reef and quite a while ago, but we went out to the reefs and we could see all the dying coral and things like that. And that kind of interested me in that topic at first, I think. And then I guess just continuing on, like even in the present, like last year with the bushfires, you can kind of see the effects even now of the climate change. So I think that's just really made me feel very strong about the whole idea of trying to restore the climate and just doing what we can to help the environment. Even if it doesn't, like even for some people who don't believe in climate change, it's still important to take care of our earth, kind of thing.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a relationship. It's a two-way thing, not just a taking thing, isn't it? Yeah. And actually, when you just said reefs just then, something I've been starting to look at myself, maybe I wanted to just share, is sunscreens, and that actually there's quite a few ingredients in some of the common sunscreens that can also contribute to the coral bleaching, which makes it harder for them to recover from the damages from heat waves too. So I just adding a little bit to the conversation there. I've been looking into that. So it's crazy just how much there is when you start looking into these things. So again, I liked your point, you know, not being perfect, but doing what we can do. Oh, here we go. So Lakshmi, can you talk more about the artificial food plants? Artificial food, please. Sorry, I think it is. I think perhaps you mentioned processed foods, that they can have a bigger impact. Yeah.
I think it's more about, well, I guess in general, like the less processed it is better as well for our well-being. I guess there's also been like studies, I don't know how reliable these studies are, but like some studies say that processed meats can cause cancer and things like that. So they have quite negative effects on us. But even just thinking about generally about consumerism is the fact of the amount of machinery and emissions we produce and things like that. So if we're processing meats, then that also contributes to those emissions and just the, I guess, the general carbon footprint that it creates. So I guess with that, it's best to avoid those kinds of processed foods. Even with processed foods, the packaging on them is quite elaborate in a way, so it uses up a lot of plastic as well. So I think that's probably why I kind of mentioned that as a point of trying to avoid it in our diets, because it is quite, yes, I guess it can have a bit of a negative effect. It may not be a huge effect, but it can have an effect on our earth as well.
And Bharati has asked, are you talking about processed soy type vegan or vegetarian foods? I think you were speaking mainly about meat products, but maybe if you'd like to just clarify that.
Yeah, so I was mainly talking about meat products because, yeah, so mainly meat products, even because with salami and things like that, it contains beef, and with cattle is kind of the, as I talked about that statistic of, I think it was 60% of mammals on Earth are raised to be eaten. So that kind of includes cattle and beef. So with that kind of statistic, it's important to like address that by avoiding buying salami and just processed meats like that. Because obviously as vegetarians and vegans, like my parents are vegetarian, so I understand like with the buying of soy products and things like that, it's kind of an alternative to buying meat. So,
and I've even I've also read some articles as well about red meats in particular. They have a particularly high carbon footprint as well. So, you know, even if you do want to continue eating them, but just reducing it 1 day, 2 days, something like that a week, that can even make quite a big impact to your personal carbon footprint. So yeah, there are papers on that too. So yeah, there's lots of interesting studies. Did anyone else have a question as well, if you'd like to raise your hand? Here we go. Dahir, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you very much for the time. Okay, I have questions about the consuming the maybe about want to look fashionable in our life, and I live at the lifestyle that people want to being perfect and want to look fashionable in our daily activity, but it's hard to understanding people to understand to care about our environment, and to hard to convince convince them to care about environment. So maybe you can explain about how we can convince people to care about environment and not being perfect. It's not needed, but we must care about environment.
Yeah, that's definitely a hard thing to do, because of course some people who are set in their views, it is hard to convince them sometimes, because I mean, if someone tried to convince me that there wasn't climate change, then I'd still be stuck on my views. So I guess it's more about maybe not using those certain words of like climate change and global warming, but just thinking about I guess, switching the perspective of it maybe, and like thinking like maybe just proposing like ideas of what the future may look like if we don't attend to these issues now. So like saying, well, what about, you know, your children, what kind of world are they going to live in if you don't care about the earth now? And maybe just showing them like history, like how I've explained it, like it's from then to now we can see the difference because of what we've done. So like even from with that trend, we can like predict that in the future, if we don't do anything about it, it's going to get worse. So I guess it's just about well, I can't really say educating, because some people will find statistics that disprove climate change and some people will find statistics that prove it. So it's really hard to kind of find a convincing argument. But yeah, I guess it's just about playing on what their values are. So if they value family, for example, and then you can talk about like, well, then what are your children going to experience in the future? Or I guess even the fact of like circular economy, you could talk about that, because that kind of, you know, you are trying to create more value from a product, but it's still good for the earth. So it's just finding alternative options that are better for us, or even thinking about our well-being. If they're not caring about the earth, then think about our well-being. So processed meats aren't good for us, so why would we want to consume them? That kind of thing.
Those are great practical tips. Thank you, Lakshmi. And we're actually up for time, so I'd like to thank you for your time, Lakshmi. Thank you for joining us from Toowoomba.
Thank you.
And there's actually a few more questions that have come in, so apologies that we weren't able to get to all of them, but perhaps everyone online, we've got a huge wealth of knowledge here. So if everyone would like to, you know, reply, add to the chat box your thoughts on the questions that are being asked as well, please do so, as well as anything that stood out during that discussion just this morning, add your thoughts there. So thank you again, Lakshmi. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next, I would like to welcome Juan Vasquez Milling, who's joining us all the way from Canada. So welcome, Juan. And while Juan's coming into the screen, I'll give his introduction. So Juan is a homeopath, naturopath, member of Sustainable Development Group of the National Bank of Canada. With 10 years of experience, Juan has been a leader in the deep ecology movement, which responds to the need for spiritual transformation in the context of climate change, sustainable development, and biodiversity. Okay, I've just got a message that we're having difficulties getting through to Juan. So what I might do is I might actually, sorry for the abrupt change, but I might just hold off on this introduction until we have Juan on the line, which hopefully should be soon. But Lakshmi, if you're still here, maybe we can continue on with those question and answers.
Yes, I'm
if you're
still
happy
here.
to do so, if you've still got time and happy to
Yeah.
do so. So, because I think that's a great conversation about how we can be practically doing that. You know, putting these into practice in our lives. It's much needed to have this kind of discussion. So thanks for jumping in.
That's okay.
And can I just ask our tech team on the line, who are doing such a good job, if you could perhaps just yeah, shout out once we do have Juan on the line, and then we can introduce him. So thank you all for your cooperation. Okay, so Lakshmi, we have another question. This one's from Richard Stoyles. If there was a slogan to change states of mind around to a better world, what would it be? Ooh. And he's got a suggestion here: eat right and be right with the world. That's catchy.
That's good, yeah. Oh, that's really hard.
Maybe
I guess
if anyone else has any thoughts, you can add in your thoughts to this.
Yeah,
well,
this
actually,
is.
You have a thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really big question, actually.
Yeah.
It's a bit hard to sum it up into a few words. I mean, I like to say it's good to be nice, but it's better to be good. So I guess that kind of things about like integrity and things like that, because that's, I guess, just being a good person in society means that you take care of the earth as well. So just thinking about your environment and your surroundings and the people you are around. But I think I'll have to think about that one a bit longer.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. It's probably an overnight kind of, I have to sleep on it.
Yeah, definitely. But it's definitely a thought-provoking question. So
yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Richard. We have Teresa on the line. Teresa's got a hand raised. So Teresa, would you like to unmute and share your question?
Hello, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. In terms of like a way to like look after the planet more, is just like finding who you really are and like loving who you really are deep down inside. And when you come to find who you really are and love yourself unconditionally, your love for the planet will just grow from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that really does tie in with the themes of, you know, it's coming back to those values, like, and which has actually come up a few times over this weekend. And I think that's right. Once we have those values at our core, we're naturally going to be more loving to the earth. Lakshmi, if you'd like to share any thoughts.
Well, I definitely agree. Yeah, it's definitely about working on yourself deep down as well. So even with the meditation that you guys did last night, and even I do my own meditation practice. So I think definitely trying to improve ourselves on the inside and then working outwards as well. So that definitely ties into the whole being the solution, I guess. Yeah.
Beautiful. Does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, I certainly would have more. If you like, maybe I'll ask one. So you mentioned one of the solutions we can look at is improving the education. And I know, at least, you know, for me, when I went through schooling, I think the focus was very much on things like recycling. We did touch on overpopulation, but, you know, what do you think that schools can do more, and universities, any sort of education institution, what can they do more to help raise this education and awareness?
I guess, well, maybe even just like putting in systems that, like having the recycling bins and just having those practical things. So just making sure we live out those ideas of what we want to do for the planet. We have to live it, kind of, not just talk about it, but live it. So even educating is good, obviously, in school, but like educating on these topics, but it's also important to, I guess, live what you talk about. But yeah, so in my presentation, I was talking about educating, so just raising the standard of living so that, I guess with statistics, we've seen that people who are more educated tend to have less kids. So that kind of addresses the issue of overpopulation. So that's something that was mentioned in David Attenborough's documentary, but I've also read about it in the book Factfulness, if anyone's heard of it. So that talks about different, I guess, statistics and things about the world. And it talks about with the raising of living standards, then people, you know, have higher, I guess, aspirations, and that comes, that means that they are unable to have as many kids as, well, not unable, but they do not tend not to have as many kids. So that's what I was referring to in my presentation. But yes, but in schools and institutions, I guess it's more about like just putting in place practical habits and systems to like with recycling, or like just having bins for paper and reusing like cardboard boxes for other purposes and things like that.
Nice. And I think even doing those little things just starts getting them thinking. So yeah. So Dohir, you have another question. Would you like to share?
Yeah, according to education, we also support teaching kids about climate change, but it is just one day explain about climate change. But I think it's not a big, it's not affected the children at all, because we just one day, but not continuing the education. And I think in reality, it's not happening in all of the society. And I mean, the top reasons that teachers give in all covering the climate change is teacher don't think that people I mean teacher thinks it's not related with their subject. So basically, what is the important role with what is the important role to make a better education in the future? Because in my communities, we have a storytelling that maybe children can easily to understanding about climate change. So maybe I need a different perspective with on other country. So I think it's
Yeah, I think well, for us in primary school, we never really talked about, I guess we talked about caring for the earth, but we never really talked about climate change and just doing what we can for climate change. So I guess maybe with that, starting off in younger ages with just like proposing this idea of climate change and doing what we can to care for the earth. But yes, definitely with the educating of it, some science teachers may not like agree with this idea, so they won't teach it. But I guess having it as part of the curriculum might help with that, like breaking down this concept of climate change. But it is definitely a huge issue if your teacher doesn't feel like they need to teach it in their subject or whatever. But it's maybe like even my maths teacher, she's the she used to, well, she left our school, but she would always put in place like recycling bins and things like that. So even though it's not something that's been a huge habit, I guess, at school of separating our papers from our other trash, but she would always have these different initiatives to, I guess, just reduce our impact on the earth. So it definitely depends on the teacher, but if we have systems in place in our curriculum and things like that, then maybe it could address that.
Thank you, Lakshmi. So I think on this note, we've had some really, really fantastic tips. I mean, it started with some of the really confronting facts of, you know, just the reality of what's going on the world, which is, I think, where, and it's been something that's been discussed over this weekend. We do need to start with knowing what is the problem, but then, of course, to look at the solutions, be practical, what we can do. So really appreciate the way you've taken us through that journey, Lakshmi. Thank you for your enthusiasm as well, and for your time to join us today.
Thank you again.
Thank you. So we will be moving into a 10-minute break now. This is an opportunity for you to get up, have a cup of tea, stretch your legs and whatnot. So it'll be a 10-minute break. After that, we'll come back. We'll do some stretches and then move on to the next sessions for the morning. So we have another panel to look forward to. The panel will be the final one for this weekend. So it's been such an exciting weekend packed of amazing conversations. So stay tuned for that. And that this last panel will be looking at, well, what is the new normal? So a nice note to end on. So on that note, I'll say goodbye and see you in 10 minutes time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Golo Pils and I'm from Germany. I lived the last 20 years in India and practice meditation with the Brahma Kumaris since the last 30 years. I'm the advisor for renewable energy towards the Brahma Kumaris, and I'm heading at the moment India 1, which is a 1 megawatt solar thermal power station coming up in Rajasthan. The aim of the project is to set up a 1 megawatt solar power station and demonstrate storage as well as continuous operation. We all are aware that for clean technology and for a broad introduction of clean technology, storage is very important and local solutions are very important. Our aim is to develop such a technology which is reliable, which is cost effective, and which has a storage so it can be utilized on demand. And we are working closely with the German government and with the Indian government to bring this technology to India and replicate it at a later stage at a very reasonable cost. And we are already in contact with many organizations, with many companies, and we hope that India One is the beginning of a development in the right direction. Our team from the Brahma Kumaris, we are volunteers, around 50 volunteers are working there on the site, and we are all yogis, so we're getting up early in the morning, we're meditating, and we manufacture all the parts ourselves. We have a big manufacturing setup there. We've engaged around 200 workers, and we cut the steel, we weld the steel, we paint the steel, we erect ourselves. So the whole plant from A to Z, from the electronic, from the tracking, everything is in-house developed, and it's our own technology. So including funding, including manpower, including technology, it takes a bit more. So we hope that totally we will take around 4 years to build and complete the plant. Of course, at a later stage, the plant can be replicated at a much faster speed. And everything goes as per the plan, and we hope that in March 2016 we can push the button and the project will be operational. We feel they're all very blessed to do such a project where we can bring spirituality with clean technology together. And it is our hope that the people around the globe will be inspired not only to replicate the technology, but also to start meditating, because we feel if there's a peace of mind, technology is better, and this is a good guidance towards the future.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you've had a good break just now to stretch your legs. If you've got a nice cup of tea to enjoy this next part. So we have our next panel, which will be the final panel for the weekend. And that will be starting at 11:20 in Sydney and Victorian time. So before that panel, what we'll be doing now is we've got a few moments to have a really rich conversation together about what we've heard this weekend that has really stood out to us and had a big impact on us. And then also from the conversations that we've had over this weekend, how do you feel that applies to yourself, to your community, and what actions would you like to change yourself and in your communities as well? That might not be even physical actions. I mean, we've been speaking a lot about our values, you know, how we're looking at our values, our thoughts, even how that affects what we then do and how we interact with the planet. So for this next section, we'll all be having a chance to interact. So I'm going to ask you to firstly turn on your videos, and I'll ask you to change into gallery view. So those who are new to Zoom, you'll see up the top right, there's a button that says view. And if you click on that, you can change it to gallery. And that way we can see everyone, see each other's faces, just so it's a more natural conversation. It can be sometimes a little bit tricky online to make things feel natural. So hoping that makes sense. So yep, clicking top right view and changing it to gallery, turning your videos on as much as possible. Great, okay, I can see a few of your faces now. I know some people might not have the technology that allows them to do that. So those who aren't able to turn on videos or their mics during this conversation, please still feel free to share it in the chat box and I'll read it out so that everyone else can hear. I'll also ask our tech team to let everyone unmute themselves so it can be a more natural conversation. Great. All right, so I don't want to do too much talking now. I would like this to be all of you guys talking. Maybe we should start with, you know, what things have really stood out for you and what you'd like to change yourself and in your community, whatever you want to answer with. Yeah, maybe put up your hand if you'd like to speak first, if you're ready to speak. Or just unmute if you can. I think our tech team's working on that. I'm keeping them busy. Are you able to unmute yet? Let's just see, just doing a test. Great, Kia. Okay, I can see you've unmuted. Do you want to share?
I think one thing that, well, there was a lot of really good conversations and a lot of good speakers and a lot of things that stood out. But one thing that I've heard a few different people say of the presenters, that just to follow your passion and pick one thing and get involved, because I sort of get a bit overwhelmed by, like, there's so much work in so many different areas and you obviously don't have time or skills to give to all of them. You know, I work full time and I'm a young mum, so I have limited time. But a lot of the different presenters, they're really inspiring. And they all said in one way or another, follow your passions, pick something that you're interested in and just trust that the collective will pull it all together, because everyone's going to have different interests and different skill sets. So I think that was really encouraging, and I think I'm going to, you know, stop feeling so overwhelmed at it and just pick something and go with it.
Do you have anything that's particularly pulling you at the moment?
I mean, I really am, I'm trying to learn more about renewable energy and that side of things, but my passion is really with minimizing waste. So that's like minimizing food waste, minimizing consumerism, living more of a slower life. Like that's really where I draw a lot of inspiration. I have passions in that area, and I like to try and inspire other people to do the same. So I think I'm just going to head down that direction while still trying to educate myself in all the other areas that are happening.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think once we just start living that and other people see, you know, like when I go for coffee at work, I take my keep cup, you know, just trying to influence others that way. So, yeah. Rain, would you like to go next? Putting you on the spot. No? Dohia? Would you like to unmute and share?
Yeah, I don't know. Kia said that he want to learn more about renewable energy, but I really interested about the climate data analysis and atmospheric science. So basically, it to forecast the weather and forecast the climates maybe 30 years later. And so we also maybe if you read the IPCC report, it's very helpful for us to making decisions to make a better life in the future. So I think that's all from me.
Thank you. And also appreciate your sharing about some of the issues that you've been observing locally where you live as well over the weekend. It's, you know, it's nice to hear about the issues that people face in different areas of the world, whether that's here in Australia or overseas. You're from Indonesia, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's been great hearing about that as well. And for Rain, just answering your question. So I'm asking, what stood out to you from this weekend? And if you were only here for some sessions, just whatever you were here for, what stood out to you and what would you like to change yourself and in your community where you live? I'll also write that in the chat for everyone else.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that stood out for me is that the sessions and the speakers are focused also more on systemic changes and not really on the individual action. Because a lot of conferences that I attended, they put they put the burden on the consumers to change behavior change, and they do not actually advocate also for systemic changes, wherein we are now pressuring and putting more burden on the system rather than the individual. And what was emphasized throughout the sessions is the strength of collective action in bringing in what we want to achieve, which is a brighter future and more responsibility and more accountability from corporations and government. So that's all. For the things I want to change in my country is more advocating for systemic changes and actually reaching out to more youth, not just in my community, not just in my region, but in other regions as well, especially since the Philippines is separated in three main islands, and most of the climate action that focuses on systemic changes are more on can be found more here in the main in the bigger region, which is Luzon, and not really on other regions, not as much. So I think capacitating and giving more awareness to youth from other regions, from other islands, would be beneficial in bringing a more bigger influence in systemic changes that we want to achieve in the country.
That's awesome. That's a really clear plan of what you'd like to see happen in your area. So thank you for sharing that. No, it's great to hear about what stood out for all of you over the weekend. And I think we might move on actually to some stretches now. So similar to yesterday, I hope you guys enjoyed the quick yoga session we had with those stretches. We have Kim joining us again today. So Kim's a Hatha yoga teacher, and I'd like to invite her onto the screen now, and she'll just do a few stretches with us. Hi, Kim. And then we'll move on to our final panel for the weekend. All right, over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. So we'll do, and thanks, Lauren. So we'll need to, we'll do something similar today to what we did yesterday. If you were here, just a little bit of Surya Namaskara and then a few seated postures, just for a little 5 minutes of movement and stretching for your body and your energy. So just come to your space, have a little space around you, standing up. I'll just put on a little music for mood. And then maybe bring your hands together in front of your heart, feet together, relax your shoulders down, maybe roll your shoulders a few times. And then let's go. Inhale, take your arms up, reaching up, lengthening. Hands down, folding forwards, hands next to your feet. Feel free to bend your knees if you need to. Inhale, raise your chin, stepping your left leg back, come into a simple lunge position. Let's place the back knee down, undo the back foot, and let's take the arms up to bed. You can look up if you're balanced. Placing the hands back down, and let's pick the back foot up Take your opposite arm up and around. It might be here, or you might be able to grab hold of the foot. And then just pull in gently. Releasing that, placing both your hands on the ground, stepping your right foot back. You can place the knees on the ground for a mild form and then lower down slowly, coming to your tummy. Once you're on your tummy, reach the shoulders back again, reach the arms back too. Upward facing dog, lift the hips up, and then back to downward dog. Feet come flat, and just take a few breaths here. Arms straight, neck soft, face relaxed. Looking forward, walk your feet to your hands. Inhale, halfway lift, raise your chin. And exhale, begin face to the shins. Okay, so second side, taking the right leg back this time. Keep the back leg straight for a few moments, easing the hips down. Then placing the back knee on the ground, and again we can take our arms up. For balance, look up. Hands can come back down, picking the back foot up. Opposite arm goes up, might stay up, or you might be able to comfortably hold onto the foot. And then if you're able to, feel free to draw the foot a little closer into the hips. Okay, release that gently, and let's step back again to the plank position, lowering down slowly. This time, let's take the legs up, and you can reach the arms back at the same time. Optional, if it's okay for your back, you can bend your knees, hold the ankles, and gently kick back. Then release the hands, straighten the legs. Let's go to a plank position and then back to downward dog one more time. Walk the feet forwards. Inhale and exhale. All right, coming straight to sitting. So we're going to take the legs out in front. Paschimottanasana. We're going to fold forwards. Hold on to the feet if you can reach. You might be up here, that's okay. You might be down here. If comfortable, relax the head down. Okay, coming back up from there. Bit of Baddha Konasana, feet together, knees apart. If your knees are up, no problem, you just sit like this. If the knees come down, you might turn the soles of the feet up a little as well. Sit up tall for a few breaths.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Kim, for that wonderful yoga routine. I think you've made me realize how much I need to work on my flexibility. So that was really good. So thank you again, Kim. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wesley, and welcome to this morning's session on Restoring Normality, What Can Be the New Normal. So I hope everyone has been enjoying the conference this weekend. And today we have a panel discussion with some very special speakers. But before we get into that, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands from which we are all dialing in from. And for me today, I'm speaking from my home in Brisbane, which is traditionally referred to as Meanjin, home of the Toowoomba and Jagera people. And I pay my sincere respects to their elders past, present, and future. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure you've probably all heard this through the weekend, but just for all of our participants who are listening, please keep your cameras on if you can, so we can, while we're connecting with each other. But please keep your mics on mute until we get to the sharing portion of our session. So there'll be a Q&A after our panel discussion. So as you're listening to what our speakers are sharing, please jot down any questions that are coming to you, and we'll have some time at the end to ask those questions. So into our wonderful speakers. So we have 4 panelists with us today. And firstly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michelle Maloney. So Michelle has a background in environmental law, and she's the co-founder of NENA. So NENA stands for the New Economy Network Australia. So Michelle's work looks at rethinking our economic, our political, our legal and governance systems into one where ecological sustainability is at the heart. And this is really to help establish a society which is what you could call earth-centered rather than human-centered. And I've also learned that Michelle has a healthy obsession for Australian native bees, especially the beautiful blue banded bee. And if you haven't heard of the blue banded bee to everyone else, I really recommend to Google it, because it is a really, really nice looking bee. So, so welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move to our next. Welcome, Michelle. Thanks for being with us. So our next speaker is Janine McBurnie. So Janine is the Associate Head of School at the School of Life and Environmental Sciences at Deakin University. She's been a lecturer for over 2 decades, teaching in the areas of ecology, environmental management and sustainability, and more recently, Indigenous engagement within natural resources management. So very interesting fields. So she's passionate about environmental education and finding ways to help society realize its impact on the environment in order to move towards a sustainable future. So welcome, Janine. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Wesley. Thanks for everyone.
Thank you. And third up, we have Dr. Johanna Nalau. So Dr. Johanna is a climate adaptation scientist and an ARC research fellow at Griffith University. So her research focuses on what drives decision-making around climate change adaptation, and the role of science within that decision-making process. She also has a personal interest in leadership, and she writes a really cool blog which explores the link between leadership, climate adaptation, and decision-making. So welcome, Dr. Johanna.
Thanks.
And lastly, we have Joshua Gilbert. So Joshua is a Worimi man, and forgive me if I pronounce that wrong, but I think Worimi man, yep, and is an entrepreneur, an agriculturalist, a climate advocate, and a business advisor. So Josh led, and this is really cool, Josh led one of the first international agricultural climate change motions. So his speciality is in weaving traditional Aboriginal wisdom together with environmental and agricultural knowledge to shift people's perceptions and bring them together on a journey of change. So welcome, Josh. Great to have you with us.
Thanks so much. So glad to be here. And if I can just start as well, Wesley, by acknowledging country, I'm on Worimi country, my family's country here. So just wanted to start with that. Thank you. And thanks for your acknowledgement as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Josh. Okay, so welcome again to all of our panelists. So guys, this morning we have about 35 minutes together, so let's get into it. So for this first question, I'm going to direct it to all of our panelists. And so the first question I wanted to ask is, so based on your areas of work and what you're seeing in the current effects of climate change, what do you see as the new normal that we as humanity can strive for? So I might direct this to Michelle first, if you can go first, Michelle.
That's fine. So what I'd like to see as a new normal, I guess, is an awareness amongst the people of the world, but particularly in Australia, because that's where I work. A couple of different things, that the previous system of fossil fuel extraction, minerals extraction, growth paradigm, an economic system and a cultural worldview that separates us from nature, we really need to rethink all of those issues. And so in terms of a new normal, I'd like to reject the old normal, and I'd like people to be thinking, and I think a lot of this, we saw it in our own work. I actually want to acknowledge the Toowoomba peoples. I'm in North Brisbane. I normally do that when I give a talk, but in a panel it's a bit more clunky. I apologise, but I'd like to acknowledge the fantastic culture and peoples of North Brisbane who've lived here since time immemorial. And so the future that I would like to see is a normal where we care for country and we care for kin, where the entire system is actually built around caring for life, sustaining life, and loving the remarkable world we live in, instead of creating a culture of pretend scarcity and terror. So I know everyone has a lot to say. I could probably ramble, but I'll stop. So I'd like a completely different normal. Thank you.
Well put, Michelle, and I think you've probably laid a good groundwork for what I imagine the others will also share. So maybe Janine, let's go to you next on that same question.
Sure. So I'll be brief because I agree with everything Michelle just said. And I'm actually here in Victoria and Melbourne on Wurundjeri country. So I'd like to acknowledge that traditional owners from here as well. So I suppose for me, one of the things that I'm pretty excited to see changing is the growing reliance on renewable energy. I think that is something that is going to be in Australia. It's been really difficult being in this field for a long time. That we sort of, when I started my undergrad degree, we were kind of seen as Australia was seen as a beacon of environmental science moving forwards, and then we took a real big dive. So I'm hoping the new normal is that we can get back to be really positive influences. And I think for me, the new normal will also be more localized, decentralized systems that we're going to work in as well. So that's it in a summary.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Janine. We might go to Dr. Johanna next, if that's okay. The same question.
Yes.
Dr.
Yeah, thanks, Wesley. Thanks, Wesley. I don't know if there is a new normal. Because I work on, a lot with climate change, and I feel like we're entering this phase where, we're not going to go into some next state and stay there. I think it's the new phase of the kind of global community. I feel like it's about constant innovation. It's about, challenging the kind of assumptions and paradigms that we've had, and we've had that kind of normal state. But I feel like globally we're just moving into this phase, which is probably partly already chaotic, but there's all this innovation emerging. And so one of the kind of inspirations that I have is Kate Raworth from Oxford, who looks at the donut economics. So it's the city of Amsterdam is already adopting that, especially during the pandemic. They said, well, this is actually an opportunity to do something completely different, change the paradigms that we have relied on. What is, how can we actually deliver, housing, education, health, and stay within the planetary boundaries. So I think those kind of initiatives make me very excited that, even if there is not a new state that we arrived, it's going to be this kind of, forward driving innovation. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Johanna. And Josh, over to you last. Thank you.
Thanks, Wes. I take this in a different light. I mean, for me, I think the new normals is as much about acknowledging the past and the knowledge that's retained there, certainly from an Indigenous perspective, but also from a non-Indigenous perspective in Australia, and equally around the world. What I think and what I would say is that we have, as a society, are yet to acknowledge the combination of skills that both of our Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here in Australia have really undertaken and what journey that's been. So for me, the work and the interweaving of those two together is equally as important as that of pre-colonial impact. And only through weaving those together will we get the best of each. And as we move as society, as we start to acknowledge that there is that rich Indigenous history here, we can take the best bits out of that and also Western knowledge and sciences to interweave for new meaning. So for me, it's about reflection at the start and then hoping to continue that journey by acknowledging kind of that the pre-colonial and post-colonial phase as well.
Yeah, really, really interesting insights, Josh. And I guess, it's really interesting to think about how that traditional knowledge can, as you said, weave in with that Western knowledge, and particularly along that idea of innovation and what the future looks like by bringing those two together. Yeah, wonderful. So thank you, everyone. So the next question I wanted to ask was, can you talk more about within each of the areas that you're working, what are you currently working on to sort of help move towards that new normal that you've envisioned within your minds? So maybe Josh, we'll start with you so you can sort of carry on with the path that you were on there.
Thanks, mate. So I guess for me, the work, have kind of got this foundational climate change, agricultural space narrative that I've been engaged with now. I guess my mind's turning to, as an Aboriginal man, what does that mean and how we include it in agriculture and broader society as well. So the work I'm doing, I'm currently doing some research into kind of that post-colonial phase, looking at the role of Indigenous people in traditional livestock or modern agricultural livestock systems. I think in Australia we're about 30 to 40 years behind the conversation internationally in that space. So I'm trying to interweave that knowledge from overseas and think about what our story is here in Australia. For instance, we haven't had a conversation here about Indigenous food sovereignty. We haven't had a conversation about how we utilise the 40% that Aboriginal people still own of Australia's landmass and what that might mean going forward as a society. There's a lot of pushback on our mob to look at native foods, but in doing that, what ends up happening is that people fail to understand it. Even though we have a cultural and food sovereignty right over native foods, we only receive 1% of the benefit. So there's a lot of opportunity for us as a mob to really utilise our land assets and our environmental assets to build a new normal, and only through acknowledging that past and bringing the best of the two spheres together, the black and the white of best practice, that we'll actually get really great outcomes.
Wonderful, thanks, Josh. How about Janine? Let's jump over to you on that same question.
Wasn't sure which way you were going to go there. Okay, mixing it up a bit. Yeah, so I'm a bit similar to Josh in that so I teach into environmental management sustainability degree at Deakin in Melbourne and Geelong, and I do a lot of the looking back. That's kind of what a lot of the stuff that we've done is to see what's happened in the past and work we have. It's changed its name to Naikiri, but it was Institute of Career Education previously to that, working together. And we have done a bit of work in some areas down not far from Melbourne with food and grasses, and the fact that, and it's been really exciting. And Josh, you're right, it's the intellectual property is a tricky thing to get through of how that's going to work. But it's really exciting to see. So some of the grains that are there, that it's not my place to talk about, but they, really high in protein, drought tolerant, resistant to fire, all the things that we need. And that's perhaps the other area that I'm working with some colleagues as well, is the fire management and traditional burning, especially in relation to climate change and what's happening, but using it and working together. So we've been talking a lot about creating knowledge together by looking back and forward as well. And I suppose what I've done, what I focus on all the time, is just talking to people in education. That's my thing. And so it's helping my students to go out. So my most exciting thing is when I get my students that have graduated that come back and talk about what they're doing, which is really good. So I think trying to get people to understand, not to be overwhelmed. I think, as it Kayla, before when I jumped in early and I was listening to it before, talking about being overwhelmed is really difficult. And teaching in this space for a long time, that's something it's hard to overcome. And so we focus quite a lot on that, on conversations that you might have with people, behaviour change, small things you can do, as well as that contribute to the big things. So things like this panel is great. And I mean, this conference, is fantastic. But I think I used to think that it wasn't going to be possible to change people's minds. And that's the thing that I've really changed. I used to focus on the people that I thought I could change their minds, but now I think it's time to focus on the people who haven't changed their minds. So that's sort of my focus for the future. Doesn't always work, but I've had some successes. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Wesley.
Thanks, Janine. Yeah, that last one's probably maybe a longer journey than the first group of people. Thanks, Janine. So maybe Michelle, can we jump across to you for that same question? I'd love to hear sort of what you're doing in NENA, and
thank you. And perhaps the quickest way to explain the work that we're doing is to actually outline the 3 organisations that we've co-founded to address connected communities, but they're very different. So I work with a remarkable Indigenous elder, Mary Graham, who's a Kombu Mary person based on the Gold Coast. She's probably Australia's leading philosopher. She, myself and a couple of others have created Future Dreaming, which is a Indigenous, non-Indigenous partnerships approach to sharing ecological knowledge. And Future Dreaming was born from my main organisation, which is the Australian Earth Laws Alliance. And in that alliance, we've got hundreds of different folks and organisations who connect, thinking that systems change on this continent is deeply important. So one area of inspiration actually, and I often joke, even though he was an old white dude, it's very cool, Thomas Berry, the great work. It's a lovely call to folks of industrialised societies to rethink the underpinning systems and structures that we were literally born into and that we are all now playing a part in changing. And so AILA is all about education, rethinking systems, but creating viable alternatives to law, economics, education that can be both right for people and right for country and right for nature. It's not easy. There's a lot of different ideas. I actually feel like we're at a phenomenal turning point in human civilization right now. And sometimes I feel like there's a war of ideas. Some people get a bit caught up on competing ideas. What we're trying to do is collect and experiment with the best. And NENA, the New Economy Network, emerged out of that to really consider how we rethink our society and particularly our impact on the living world. You can't get away from a discussion about how we live, work, play, whether you call that economics or society. So that's where NENA came from. And so the work we're doing is all about building as much energy and initiative within civil society to get on with the work and to push back at governments that at the moment in Australia seem reluctant to do the systems change we need. But in the meantime, everyone I know is working hard to create those remarkable, viable alternatives that are already happening. It's actually a bizarre, disturbing, scary, but also incredibly exciting time to be alive. So, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. And I mean, yeah, I guess, looking at that systems change is absolutely critical. Like, on the one hand, there's the individual level of change where, people's habits and the way we live and our lifestyles and everything. But of course, the systems change is absolutely critical for how the world gets to from where it is today to.
Of course, and all I want to say, particularly for young people, is it's not either or, it all fits together. Don't ever feel that your role isn't important. Everything we do as individuals matters, but we can only make significant change by banding together and really working collectively, which we talked about yesterday too. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. And Dr. Johanna, how about from your side and based on your area of work?
Yes, I focus mostly on climate change adaptation, which is for many, it's pretty much everything. But I'm leading a project at the moment trying to understand how the whole idea about kind of anthropogenic climate change, how can we adapt to that, and trying to look at the scientific literature, also the kind of historical past in understanding, what was kind of good guidance before and whether that's actually effective at the moment. I work a lot internationally, and so I just wanted to mention a few things. So one of the kind of exciting things I've been involved with is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So they have a Nairobi work program, and under that sits an initiative called Resilience Frontiers. And I'll put a link to that as well. But that's very much about kind of, it's been a collective intelligence process trying to understand how can we do better? How can, you know, where are the innovations? And at the moment they're collecting all these examples of bright lights. So they call these bright lights, you know, something that's super innovative. It's like, I don't know, food made from air, and there's all kinds of, you know, crazy sounding things, but it's very much about looking at, you know, there's all these new technologies, but there's also, so local and indigenous knowledge is very much part of woven into the 8 pathways, and trying to understand how we can actually, you know, make change, but also kind of marry the kind of the past and the innovations that we're seeing. And my exciting role this year is to start teaching climate change adaptation. So I'm creating one of the core courses. So Griffith University is launching the first ever globally Masters of Climate Change Adaptation, so a new master's degree. And so I'll be teaching into that. And so all this discussion is very much, you know, because I'm in the process of building my course. And I think one of the things for young people, I think it is important when, you know, to kind of question, you know, the people that, you know, are teachers or lecturing, or, you know, when we talk about these kind of paradigms, is a question and ask the question, why? Like, why does it have to be this way? Because there's all these new ideas. And as Joshua was saying, you know, there's also old ideas that we just haven't embraced. So I fully agree with Michelle. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Johanna. Okay, so the next question I wanted to put to the group, and I might direct this to Josh, to you to start with. So when we talk about, you know, climate restoration or adaptation, you know, there's always that tendency to talk about things on the action-based level, the systems-based level, the change-based level. But when I think about the human-linked causes to climate change that we're actually fundamentally trying to change, personally, from my background, I really see it boiling down to things within the spirit of individuals, things like greed, attachment, and ego on a very fundamental level, which obviously is the seed for the way that we live our lives and, you know, all the things that result from that. So I was wondering from your perspective, and I think you've touched on this already, but is there a deeper fundamental, and maybe I could even use the word spiritual issue that that you think also needs to be addressed through motions and within the individuals in order for all these other climate restoration or adaptation initiatives, including all the work that everyone here is doing, in order for all of those to be successful? Do you think there's something fundamental on the level of the human spirit that also needs to shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something a lot bigger at play that needs to be kind of shared. I think in Australia we've had a few instances of that, but have never really been able to harness that long term. So I went to the Victorian Fires in 2009 and, you know, fought down there for a bit, and, you know, saw that the promise and the commitment by citizens and governments to really try and implement change, which never happened. And, you know, for me, what's heartbreaking out of that is then to see what happened in, you know, New South Wales and Victoria last year. Again, that momentum again, and a real commitment from, you know, both government and private citizens to then get crushed by COVID. So I think there is a kind of generous and genuine spirit out there for change. Whether people, and I often have this debate in the ag sector, that it doesn't matter to me whether people accept climate change, the term and the notion, because often that's quite political in our space. What matters most to me is if we're getting people who are adapting really well, who are thinking about what the future might be, and who are really just genuine people trying to do their best on the land that they have and to connect with that. The way I see it is that our Indigenous connection to land is equally as important to a Western connection, and both have their own story and narrative that need to be shared and valued, I guess, because it's no point me trying to trump somebody else's connection because they're connected to that place as much as what I am, at a very different level at times, but still connected. So I think that kind of spiritual change has to happen in order for us to get a bigger change. And I think that the narrative around the fire events, for instance, and we've seen it with droughts and floods and all that as well. These kind of major climate activities are, for me, a point of connection. And what I see in our communities being able to connect people, and it gives me hope that we can change, but we actually need to make the change in the next step. So I'm hopeful that those activities and those conversations still happen, and that they're done in a way in which we can buy into and build on the spirit of Australians, kind of generally, to really kind of implement that change.
Great, thanks, Josh. And Michelle, can I ask you the same question? Because I know this is obviously a big thing that you have to grapple with in your work. So curious to hear your perspective.
And I was so intent listening to Joshua, I've almost not forgotten the question, but is it that we think we need a change in our mindset, spirit, culture? Was that sort of the question?
Yeah, in order to get people to commit to that change or to make that change, my question was, on a fundamental level, when you look at the root cause of human mentality or consciousness, which is really about greed and all those sorts of things, egos, those sorts of things, do you think there needs to be a shift on that level in order for all of those, I could say, action-based or those systems-based changes to be successful, for people to commit to those?
It's a great question. And I agree with what Josh said. In some ways, I don't mind why people do good things. It's kind of up to them. But on the other hand, certainly the theory of earth jurisprudence and a lot of Western deep ecology argues that people who've emerged from industrial societies, particularly the European tradition of industrialized society, has developed these ideas about the non-human world that are really unhealthy. They're quite sick. Capitalism itself, emerging off the basis of private property and property accumulation, has drawn us to where we are today, where some people think they can do whatever they want to the living world, including pumping out the kinds of pollution that's caused climate change and digging massive holes and destroying entire ecosystems. Certainly, as an ordinary, caring little Aussie kid, I always thought that behaviour was a bit sick and that we should care for plants and animals. There wasn't much mystery to me. I thought if you've got to live on this planet, you should do it in a way that supports all life. So I think, and the work we do definitely gently encourages people to rethink their notions of what they're allowed to take from Mother Earth without giving back, and I say Mother Earth loosely. So I think, and it's certainly in the work we do, and certainly in the theory of earth jurisprudence, it does represent a strong call to rethink our relationship with the non-human and the rest of the beautiful earth community. But it really depends on your culture. We have people on this call from all around the world. They've got different cultural backgrounds, and I hate to tell anyone what to do or what to think. But from our own place, our own culture, and our own urgencies, I think many people do need to connect to the living world. Thomas Berry talks about how really through industrialization, we tried to create a wonder world, and all we've created is a waste world. And I kind of like that, because if we think about the bare basics of what we need to live and love, we've taken industrialized societies to a whole level of ridiculous complication, overcomplication and destruction. And I think at a heart level, it needs to be rethought. So maybe my short answer was yes.
I liked how you finished that last sentence too, on a heart level. It's, wonderful. Great, thanks, Michelle. Okay, so I've got time for another question. So I might direct this to Janine to start with. So the question I wanted to ask Janine was, so can you visualize the new normal that you're hoping as we as humanity will reach from your perspective? And can you sort of transport yourself into that future state and just describe to us in the past tense, how did we reach there from your perspective?
Thanks, Wesley. As we talked about this when I chatted to you the other day, this is an assignment that I used to set my students. So, you know, in 2030, 2040, what does the world look like? And then they had to do the steps of how did we get there? And they found it really challenging, really difficult. Where they wanted to be, no brainer, that was fine. And I think what it looked like and what it looks like is sort of a more decentralized, community-focused world that we live in. And so smaller scale, not so much. And it's being in Melbourne and having gone through a crap year in 2020, can't think of a better way to say that, but it's sort of what we did in a little bit, and why it worked so well is we started to have our 5Ks that we had to live in. We walked, we met people more regularly, we knew our neighbour, I live in a kind of fairly urban environment in Melbourne, but my family is all in the country and they had a very different experience. And some just things that are happening, I think that decentralisation of energy, some stuff that's being talked about now is so many people in Melbourne have solar because it became cheap and it became available and there were grants. And now they're starting to think about, so if I'm looking back, what that meant is that some of those, we didn't have just one big battery, but we have decentralised batteries around the communities so that we're not all reliant. And the same thing for water as well. And I think the other thing that I'm very excited about in 20, wherever we are, 30, 40, 50, is food. That food has changed and food systems have changed. And there is a more, that mix of learning from Indigenous agriculture, which has been so strong, as well as seasonality. I'm always shocked with so many of my students have no idea that different plants arrive in different seasons. They thought that, yes, certainly, yeah, we know that we get mangoes in Melbourne at Christmas time, but tomatoes grow all year round, they're fine. So just things like that, I think, an awareness of our impact, the impact of the food that we ate is very important. I think that's something that has started to really happen now, but I'm sure in the future is much stronger. People are much more aware in the cities, and I don't think that there will be the mega cities. I suspect that when we're looking back, I think it's going to be quite different. And again, just some example of that, Melbourne at the moment is extremely quiet and people are not wanting to go back to the big offices and travel there. And we've learned that we can work at home quite successfully for a lot of the jobs that we do. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think there's going to be different ways that we can. I wouldn't want to wish what happened last year on anybody, but I think we've learned a lot of what we can do, and it's been some really good lessons for, as Joanna, adaptation. We kind of were forced to do some things and change our behaviours, but it worked really well. So I could talk for a long time on this, so I'll pass it on to someone else. But I think that decentralisation and smaller community, focus on community, I think is going to be really, really important in the future. Thanks, Wesley.
Thanks, Janine. Yeah, I think, a lot of that, resonates with me as well. So, Johanna, do you have anything else you want to add from your perspective onto that same question?
Well, obviously, I agree with everything. I think that one of the key things that I've been thinking in the last probably 2 years is the kind of shift in mindset. So how can we enable people to actually change fundamentally the way they think? So a lot of my research is looking into decision sciences and decision making and trying to understand what are the kind of psychological barriers, but also opportunities there that, we could, I don't know, exploit is a bad word, use in a constructive way to help people actually shift their mindsets. And I think one of the key things that it's over and over comes from especially from the health literature, is like, if you want to enable change, make it easy. So for instance, things like recycling, I mean, Australia is getting better. But, if it's not an easy choice, people won't do it. And I think, there's massive role that we can individually play in you know, creating awareness and also changing our own behavior. So I heard that Kia was talking before this panel started on, you know, reducing plastic, and there are all these amazing choices. And I've just, you know, in the last few months I've been on this kind of rampage on, you know, trying to get like natural, like plastic free products into, you know, for my cleaning and for everything. But I think you know, and there are these innovations. So for instance, there's this Toyota, I know that they're thinking of creating this whole package where you would buy the solar panels, the electric car, and basically you would have this system where you know, you have the solar panels on the roof and you get electricity to run your household. You also charge your car at home. And so those are kind of whole package innovations, and obviously the policy environment then needs to support that. And I was very disappointed again seeing yesterday on Twitter the federal government announcements that they are not, you know, supporting electric vehicles. So I think the policy environment, but then, you know, as citizens, like raising the awareness that there are these kinds of options and that we actually want them. My 5-year-old son is very upset that I don't have an electric car, because he's like, we're letting, like, you know, all these emissions, and, you know, why can't we have an electric car? And I'm like, I'm a single parent. I'm like, I'm trying to, you know, I'm holding out to the year when we actually have those in Australia, so that it is an affordable option for a lot of people. And there is this kind of car sharing, ride sharing things come through. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Johanna. Yes, and yeah, really good points there about practicality and ease and affordability, and definitely. So just one more question, and I'll just leave this sort of open to everyone. So what tips do you have for everyone who's listening today on what they can do to help build that momentum on this journey to a new normal? So how can everyone here get involved in helping to create that momentum and be a part of that change?
You know, I'll just, sorry, Michelle.
No, you're okay.
Something that I've realised after kind of 20 plus years of teaching is a lot of the people coming through have absolutely no idea of politics and the influence of the decisions in policies. So I think getting people politically aware, and I was an 18-year-old, I had no clue about anything to do with politics. And my poor kids have grown up very aware and are very politically minded. And like Johanna said, you know, why aren't we doing this? And we should be doing things this way, and get very angry at people for not doing things the right way. But I think that's something that needs to happen. And I think if you're not, and people hate the idea, and you say the word politics and their eyes glaze over, but that's where the decisions are made. That's where the electric cars will become cheaper. That's where we'll have more stronger action on climate change. So for me, pushing students, even to explain to them how our political voting system works, has been really important, which is a bit frightening for them to get that far. So I think, and I get super excited about politics now, which I can't believe that could ever happen. And it'd be like, it's a good time, I think, at the moment too. I think for Australian politics, I think a lot could happen and has been happening. Thank you.
Thanks,
I was
Janine.
just going to jump in on both a combination of the previous question and this one. So in terms of how, if we're looking back from 2040, 2050, how did we get to a better place? And in fact, what is the role of all of us in helping get to that better place? To me, there's two, we think about this an awful lot. So I've got a quick answer, but I've guessed that there's two big sides to how we can make society change. One is through joining up civil society or ordinary human beings with their civil society initiatives, whether you're a researcher or an activist or a local person protecting a local creek. Civil society initiatives need to continue growing. The localization, centered awareness of sovereignty of First Nations peoples. There's so much progressive movement going on in civil society in Australia. It is so inspiring. If you watch the normal news, you would never hear any of it. There's so many great people doing good stuff. But the other side of it is that, and I was going to reassure anyone who does have their eyes glaze over with politics, I'm the same. Think of politics and government as the most powerful way and the quickest way to bring all of society's big resources together. And I mean money and people. So on the one hand, we need to keep building. And if we're looking back, we continue to build civil society initiatives, shiny people showing the way like Joshua, Johanna and Janine. And then on the other side, that pushed, particularly because we have such recalcitrant Australian governments, we need to be showing them how other governments around the world are trying to do good things and how we think we can do good things. So we have to stop the extractivist focused economy. We have to turn to regenerative approaches. We have to build on the foundation of ancient culture and wisdom and follow the future of Indigenous leadership. And in terms of how we get the collective action to shift, this one of the easiest ways, and I'm a skeptic, but I took a long time to analyze it. Ideas collected around Green New Deal, the Green New Deal, which I rejected for a while because it was very American, but the idea of making a collection of macroeconomic changes that absolutely embrace climate change as a problem and a challenge, that absolutely embrace a law of obligation to support all citizens equally. There's so much we can do if we all band together. And I don't mean to sound that as a cliche. If you actually break down the detail, the quickest, fastest way to turn the ship around, whether it's with government or whether it's with joining up civil society groups, it's together. And that's why I've spent 4 years building the New Economy Network. It's a volunteer role. We just did it because we just want to get more and more and more people showing what's possible in a positive, really good way to go. And the other really future thinking stuff we're working on that we don't expect to see in our lifetime, but we're sowing the seeds for the next generation to keep working on, is actually changing the whole structure of governance in Australia. Right now we have a federal government which can control some things, state governments that just act godlike across laws, and they're disenfranchised not just First Nations peoples, but all local communities. We spend a lot of time with communities who are fighting the latest unwanted extractivist mining, water extraction, the latest development that people don't want to see happen. And instead of doing that forever, we're designing a system where we can really learn from Aboriginal people's governance systems where they had hundreds of local council or nation states, or however you want to describe them, bodies that manage the country. So some of that returning to true local power, not just what we have at the moment. So in terms of what individuals can do, I think I said this yesterday, but do everything you can as an individual and then just join anything that lights up your heart. If you feel good volunteering or studying or working in a space, then you'll do well. Just join up with others and be part of the phenomenal turn that we're seeing around the world. That's the end of me. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, really well put. Josh or Johanna, is there anything you guys wanted to add, or any other perspectives on that question, or just any tips for everyone that's listening here?
My only quick one is just that we need to work together to define what the new normal is. I think we all have different perspectives on that, and it's only through opening conversations about this that we'll actually get to understand what everyone is after. And we need to do that in a way that's inclusive of a range of just inclusive, actually is probably the best word for it. But we need to think and take into account others' views when doing that. And certainly the best way in which we can connect with others is by creating space and really listening empathetically with them to really hear and understand where they're coming from. So for me, it's about creating that space, listening to different forums and different views, and working together to really kind of understand where we're heading first before setting off on the journey together, and getting somewhere where we might not all be happy with. So that's it from me. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Josh. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our panel session. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go into a breakout group session. So the way it's going to happen is, so I'm going to give 2 questions for us to discuss in our groups, and then our tech team is going to send us into breakout rooms. So you'll see probably a little window or a button pop up, and you just need to click the join button when that comes up. And so when you join these groups, first just introduce your name and where you're joining from. And then if you could just assign one person in your group who could just be the representative, who can just take note and summarize what everyone is sharing. And we'll come back together after about, I think about 13 minutes, and we'll have a little bit of time to just share the summary from each group. So time is obviously going to fly quite quickly. So please just be as essential as possible in your sharings, just so everyone has time to speak. So I think I'll give you the 2 questions now. Okay, so the first question will be, based on what we've all just heard from our panelists, how has your vision of the new normal changed? So this is actually a really good tie on to what Josh just said in his last comment about having more of these discussions about our view of the new normal. So that first question, so based on everything you've just heard, how has your vision of a new normal changed? And the second question will be, what practical steps do you feel inspired to do now to help create that new normal? So that's the 2 questions, and I think we have about 13 minutes. But you'll receive, I think one of our tech team will just send a little broadcast message when the time is close to being up. So, okay, so I think we'll be moving to our groups now. So when you see the button to join, you just need to click. Okay, welcome back everyone. Feels like that time went quite quickly, and I know that at least our group was still sort of in the midst of some discussion before the time went up. So that's okay. So does anyone want to share from their groups? What were the standout things or the interesting things that were mentioned in your group discussions? And I'll just ask, sorry, if you could just raise your hand. So there's a little at the bottom of your Zoom window, there should be a reactions button, and you can just raise your hand there. So, okay, so Kia, you've raised your hand. Would you like to share?
Hi. Yeah, so in our group, we were discussing, so with the new normal, we all sort of agreed that, as was touched on in the presentation or in the panel, that there's kind of no static normal that we're going to be at in the near future. And it's sort of like we've reached that point already. We're having crisis after crisis, and they're becoming more common, and once in a lifetime events are happening every year. So it's no longer once in a lifetime. So our new normal is more about being able to adapt to what is happening in the present, and continually evolve and make change and do better. And we recognise that more people, particularly after the pandemic, are seeing that we have to change. So even if people don't know what to change to and what to do, more people are recognising that there is a problem, and we do need to take steps to mitigate it. In terms of practical steps that we were discussing that we'd taken, so it's more around rethinking our activities, reducing our own carbon footprint and our waste, reviewing, like I've started reviewing what my money is invested in, and making changes there, joining local groups and connecting with other people so we're not just on our own. Being aware of our own consciousness and thoughts, and sending our energy back into nature, reviewing our water consumption, and things just like starting our own home garden and little practical steps within our own home.
Great, thanks, Kia. Yeah, really broad range of tips there. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, Lauren, you've got your hand up. Would you like to share?
Hi, yes. So for the first question, we're talking about, a couple of us actually picked up on that donor economies, like what they're doing in Amsterdam at the moment, and I would like to see that being implemented here in Australia. And we also mentioned the focus more on communities. And I said, I feel like that's particularly lost in my generation, or at least where I live, it feels a bit like that. And we also discussed that as we transform, other things will also transform. As others become aware, there will be transformation flowing on from that. So that was the first question. Second question, somebody shared that they are currently in a summer school climate change, focusing on climate change, you know, how to do climate change, how to drive actions, campaigns, that kind of thing. So that was really awesome to hear. Somebody else was talking about access theory, which looks at minimizing the gap between community and, I think it was politicians. Mahmoud, if I said that wrong. And also about eating seasonally and learning more about the Indigenous knowledge here in Australia and how we can learn about that to influence the structures here in Australia, like what was discussed in the panel. I think it'd be great to hear more of that in everyday conversations around Australia. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Wonderful.
Actually, I think I might have misexplained something. I can see Mamun is talking.
Sure. Mamun, would you like to unmute and feel free to add anything to that?
Yeah, actually, I would like to also, add something with Lauren. We also discussed about the structuration theory by the Anthony Giddens, how it could also help to get back the normal, because in the inclusion of community, resource of community, as well as the structure of the agency, human agency, and social agency, that could also help us to do act in the face of climate change. Because here the city corporation, politician, and also the practitioners, they could play as the structure. At the same time, marginalized communities, those are vulnerable or they are surviving, they could play as an agency between in the face of climate change. So the inclusive community and the restoration of biodiversity action, it could play the agency, and at the same time the adaptation committee, the scientist, and also resource person, they could play as the structure along with the government. So that's why we need also the reshape our aid disbursement policy and also the national revenue budget, how we will spend this short of budget. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you, Mamun. Thank you for adding on to that. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got about, I think about 5 to 10 minutes now. So we're just going to use the last time we've got for a Q&A with our panelists. So I'd like to invite anyone, if you have any questions that you want to ask any of our 4 panelists, we'll just ask if you can, perhaps I might ask Falak if you're there, Falak, and if any questions have come through, then feel free to share if you're there, Falak. Otherwise, if anyone wants to raise hands and to give you a question, that's absolutely fine.
No more question came in the group chat yet. So if someone wants to raise hand, they can.
Okay, no problem. Okay, Mamun, I can see your physical hand is being raised.
Yeah, it's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, anyone can. Shall I ask my question?
Yes, go for it, Mamun. Go for it.
Yeah, please. Anyone can respond to my questions. How can climate scientists go further with heritage, indigeneity, and folklore studies discipline at the university all over the world to build a unique research hub? Because we know the Western climate science and indigenous knowledge that can also help us, simultaneously.
Mahmoud, did you want anyone in particular to answer, or perhaps we can?
Yeah, I think Johanna can respond. I mean, she might be interested with these questions.
Oh, I thought this was more like maybe Joshua's.
Yeah, I'm also familiar with your work, some of work.
Okay. Yeah. So the question was that in terms of how do you create this kind of platform or network where you can share the knowledge?
Yeah, if I wanna say very clearly, actually, I mean, climate scientists are working on their way. At the same time, also those, I mean, the academician or researcher working with the indigeneity or traditional culture or folklore.
Yeah.
So they're working with the community-based knowledge. So they have particular, I mean, expertise, and climate scientists have the particular expertise. So how they both can work collaboratively and jointly as a research hub in academically in an institute. Because as long as we know, we have the climate science department, environmental science department, or sustainability science department. At the same time, we have heritage studies, folklore studies around the world. So, but we don't have the action based or the empirical based work collaboratively.
Yeah, no, look, I'll just answer shortly, and maybe we can email after as well on the topic. So I think in climate change adaptation, I mean, especially in the IPCC, we are starting to look a lot like at the empirical evidence base to include Indigenous knowledge and local knowledge in particular. The problem we have with the assessment process is sometimes that, you know, a lot of that knowledge is not being documented. So one of the good projects that I have seen that's in the Pacific Islands region is the Cost Back project, where they did exactly that. So they were working with the local communities to try to understand Indigenous knowledge. So that was more about the weather and climate indicators. And they were very particular. The whole project it wasn't revealing Indigenous knowledge, you know, to the community or to the broader community. Because I think one of the things that with Indigenous knowledge in particular is that there's sacred knowledge as well. And, you know, so in those processes, you have to be really careful what can be reported and kind of, you know, broadcasted outside of the community. But globally, I'm been really happy that we've seen, especially in the assessment process, but within the even United Nations, you know, there's a lot more Indigenous groups coming in and facilitating that collaboration. I think within the climate science community, there's still, I'm a social scientist, so there's even, you know, difficulties, you know, having people who work on hard climate change science and doing the modeling, working with people like me who are looking into this kind of, like fuzzy, more, you know, what are people thinking? What are they feeling? And sometimes, you know, the modelers are like, okay, well, we've run these 50 models. This is what this, you know, data tells us. Whereas, you know, somebody who works with people, you know, it's a very, you know, our methods are very different. But I think globally, in the recent years, I've been really happy to kind of see that movement. And maybe we can talk about via email in terms of how would you then set up something like that as well.
Yeah, thank you for your, I mean, response. Actually, as long as we know, Indigenous communities, they are facing their climate to adapt over the generation. At the same time, along with the Indigenous community, we have also some local community, folk community, a very small cluster group of people. They have the artistic communication. And through their lifestyle, through their life pattern, they are also adapting, mitigating the impact of climate change over the generation. So nowadays, this knowledge also must appreciated because they are doing with their capacity, not dependence to the scientists, because they are always depend on the nature. As we know, the natural climate solution will help us more than anything or any side of knowledge. So that's why I mean, maybe it's time to establish institutionally, or we need to make a framework institutionally at the academic atmosphere or ambient. The scientist, climate scientists know how it works, but folklorist or the anthropologist, they know how community works. So both maybe can go at the same time. Yeah, my thinking like
absolutely agree. Yeah,
because you have the solution, but I have the population, I have the community. How you will implement your knowledge with the community? You need me and me need you.
Yes, absolutely.
That's fine.
I might just ask Janine or Josh, did you guys want to add anything to that?
Just really quickly, I mean, I know with one of the things that I found with, and sort of what Johanna said as well, is that some of the hardcore scientists, they find it very difficult to accept that it might be talking about a painting or a story or a song, and that holds, and also that it all has to be put together with social goes exactly with what we would call facts and things like that as well. You can't separate them out, they're all together. And I think that's something I think your idea is great, Mamon, as well, and I think it's slowly happening in certain areas, but it's when I've seen it fall apart has been when sort of the Western scientists want to take over the knowledge and bring it into the Western way, and that is not going to work. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm more of the social science area as well, and it's getting heaps better. It's changing a lot, but there's still a way to go to get that accepted. Thanks.
I just think maybe in my own life, I think about it as I have this unwavering faith that climate scientists are right, and I wish they'd have the same unwavering faith that our Indigenous knowledge is right. So I think for me, one of the things that I struggle with is this kind of view that Western science has to approve Indigenous science, and that's very demoralizing for us who have got all this knowledge sitting there waiting to utilize it, and it kind of creates that tension there. And I think, Janine, I have the same experiences where Western scientists want to try and prove or take that knowledge and utilize it is where the tension gets going, or even the framework in which Western science needs to be portrayed. So, I'm part of a really great group with the CSIRO in Australia who are looking at and who kind of blend Indigenous climate knowledge with Western climate knowledge. And where that's fallen down in the past has been where the Western scientists want to put Indigenous knowledge into this kind of perfect ball of how Western science works, and take that and who owns that and how is it used. So I think there's some great examples of where it has the potential to work. It's just kind of unpacking all those stereotypes and the language and the frameworks that exist to try and work out where that neutral ground is.
Great, thanks, Josh. Wonderful. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our session now. I just wanted to say, if anyone else had any more questions, we might see if we can try and send those off to our panelists if they have time to reply, or feel free to get in touch with them with your questions. So I do apologize that we've run out of time to take other questions. I just wanted to say a big thank you again to all 4 of our panelists for their valuable time. And I mean, everyone here can see that they've all got such a rich background, rich wealth of experience, rich area of work that they're coming from. So it's really, truly a great treasure to have you all with us this morning. So thank you all again for being with us today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand back over to Lauren, and Lauren is going to close out the rest of today and the conference for us. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you all, and thank you, Wesley. I found that was a really fascinating discussion, actually. So thanks all for a part of that. So just to close up, this has been such a fascinating weekend with some really, really rich conversations. So I'll just do a quick overview over what we've covered in the weekend. I know a lot has happened, so it can feel like, wow, just the conversations that happened on Friday night already feels like, a long time ago. So I just want to run over a few of those messages. But some of the key themes that I found kept coming up was the importance of working together as a collective, tapping into your communities and finding mentors as well, so that you're never alone. We're doing this all together. Another theme I felt that kept coming up as well was restoring our connection and love with the earth. There was really beautiful messages that came throughout so many panels on that, that we even go back to our thoughts and our inner values, and how when they're restored, then that will flow on to how we interact with the earth and each other as a community. So on Friday, we heard what restoration and being part of the solution means. We heard that ecological restoration and is very important as well for climate change, that we're never working in silos, but rather everything feeds into that big picture. We heard some great stories, the importance of having knowledge-based actions, that we're actually understanding the problem before we can then get people motivated as part of the solution. And we also spoke about how restoring our thoughts and our values helps flow on to guiding our actions and relationship with the earth. That flowed nicely into Saturday morning, where we explored the rights of people and nature, which was just, it was quite an emotional conversation, really. One thing that really stood out to me from this was the need to connect more with the land. I think one thing that was said of the country, not on the country, not using and taking from the country, but of the country, and just being with it and making that connection. After that, we heard about art as activism. I found it very inspirational to hear how it's possible to unite a creative passion with such an important cause, and how that can be a means to spread messages of joy, and the positive things that we can do to work towards a more sustainable life, which I think, people tend to remember those really, beautiful things, the joy, and also just that, focusing on the negative things, sometimes there needs to be that balance with also bringing out the positive things. So I just remembered a few of the messages from that session. After that, we heard from a few inspirational and very, very motivated individuals over a few presentations. There was a big theme through those on falling in love with the earth again, and how we can practically put that into our lives every day. After that, we heard about the importance of community resilience and food security. We heard about some of the issues around Australia, especially Central Australia, as well as other parts of the world that relate to that. I found a really interesting suggestion or discussion that came out of that was, how do we communicate with communities when we're wanting to influence change for climate change action, and the importance of speaking into that community's interests and their language, what's appropriate to them. So it might not be the scientific figures and whatnot, but more a story that will really touch people and help communicate to them. After that, we heard about the UN Global Compact Young Professionals Program, which was very inspirational and motivating, and I'm looking forward to hearing more on their projects, such as tiny forests. This morning, we heard about the history of consumerism that had both some sobering facts as well as what we can practically do ourselves. We're not trying to be perfect, but just what we can do within our own control and the way we do our lives one step at a time. And then this most recent panel, I'm sure it's all still fresh in your memory, but a few points that really stood out to me was looking towards a future with more local, decentralized, community-focused lifestyles, looking at donut economies as a role model, the need for system change, and how to marry the past with new innovations and learn from the Aboriginal people's management systems. We talked about the importance of spiritual connection to land, no matter our backgrounds, and to rethink the notions of what we take from Mother Earth without giving back, and moving to less of that taking and exploiting. So I've thoroughly enjoyed these conversations. I hope you all have as well. A reminder back to what Hita explained back on Friday, that the outcomes and the input from what we've discussed in this weekend will feed into what we call an outcomes report. And that is presented to the Conference of Youth, which is run by Youngo, the youth's NGO, and that is organised by the UNFCCC. So it's a real opportunity for you to help contribute towards the messages that we're wanting to send to that global platform. So as a reminder, as we've been saying every day, I'll sound like a broken record, but if you'd like to make sure that your reflections, your aha moments, what really stood out to you goes into that, there is a link to a form where you can put those thoughts. It's in the email that was sent out both Friday morning and again yesterday morning. You can use that same link again today. And as a bonus, you'll also get a participation certificate if you do complete that. So this weekend has been hosted by the Brahma Kumaris Australia. It has been such a pleasure to work with all of you, with all of our amazing panelists. It's honestly, I felt so lucky to be able to be part of this. We did bring up the importance of positive thinking and how going back to those thoughts can help influence the world around us. So if you're interested to learn more about that and meditation and other activities of the Brahma Kumaris, we do have meditation centres in every state, as well as retreat centres in Victoria and New South Wales. We also have a virtual centre where you can join meditations, classes, talks, even cooking classes, etc., which are also all vegetarian, which does help with climate change and reducing our environmental impact. So all of that is available on the website brahmakumaris.org.au. I will post that in the chat box shortly. And if you'd like to know more about the Brahma Kumaris Environmental Initiative, you can go to eco.brahmakumaris.org, which I'll also post in the chat box soon. I know our panelists today have been sharing some really awesome resources. I've been opening them up as they've been pasting them there. So please do check them out. Check out their initiatives, what you can get involved with. There's been some great tips over this weekend, how to get involved with all these things. So on that note, it's my final thank you to everyone involved. Thanks again to our panelists for their time and sharing their amazing wealth of knowledge. We'll go out now with one last beautiful meditation for our planet to send out those good wishes and create feelings of harmony with each other as we all work towards our vision of the best future that we can create now. All right, thank you.
In my mind, I go to a place in nature, a place of greenery and peace. In my thoughts, I emerge the wind, and I can hear the leaves of the tree moving in the breeze. The wind whispers secrets in my ear, and I understand. I can feel the sunshine on my face, softly warming my heart and soul. The birds are chirping in the background and singing songs of happiness and joy. I emerge the feeling of belonging to the planet, to nature, to the animals and all living beings. I feel safe in being forever connected to this global family of all living beings, and being connected to the world around me. I will remember this moment if I ever lose hope for our common future of harmony for all.